We shift our focus to this story now. A meeting of the ANC's National Executive Committee, which was scheduled for today, has been postponed. The ANC meeting would have been the first meeting of the NEC post the elections. The top leadership will now meet on Thursday. Now, SABC Senior political reporter Samkele Maseko joins us live with the very latest. Good afternoon, Samkele. So which one is it? Because we're hearing that the meeting was postponed because, or amid some sort of a fallout, people are accusing each other of having sold out to the MK, while we actually saw the SG's tweet stating that they're locked in an NWC meeting.
Let's be frank about this particular issue. There is no fallout within the African National Congress at this point in time from what we're hearing. Yes, there are differences on the ideological posture of the ANC. Particularly, there are those whom come from the trade union movement, like your Gwede Mantashes, whom are saying that you cannot lean towards the Democratic Alliance and leave out the economic freedom fighters, leave out the MK party, because they still represent the same constituency of people and come from the same school of ideology as you, as the broad church of the African National Congress. As we speak now, the governing party is having its National Working Committee meeting, its NWC meeting, which started at about 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock at Luthuli House. It was preceded by an ANC officials meeting in the morning, where the ANC's negotiating team on coalitions, which held meetings throughout the day at Houghton Golf Club yesterday with various political formations, your EFF, your DAs, your Patriotic Alliance, reporting back to the ANC's officials, which will ultimately culminate in the ANC's negotiating and officials of the party reporting to the NWC on the discussions they've held thus far.
Now, there are reports of some sort of a model that the ANC is presenting called Supply and Confidence. We've seen it on several reports today in the early morning. Just unpack it for us, because it seems they're proposing that they hold on or retain the position of president and deputy president and a few cabinet posts, among others.
It is a model that they take from countries such as Turkey, Germany, and some European countries when it comes to that power sharing model, where the opposition would take the legislative arm of the state. They would ultimately take the National Assembly, the speaker position, the chairpersons of portfolio committees, which would be ultimately shared with the proposal on the table between the Democratic Alliance and the Inkatha Freedom Party. But as it currently stands, Inkatha Freedom Party does have a chairpersonship within the various portfolio committees in Parliament, which is Scopa, currently held by Mkhuleko Hlengwa in this 7th Parliament. But what we ultimately know is that the ANC's National Executive Committee, particularly those within the NEC, they may not totally be comfortable with that particular posture, because you've got them saying that if you go with the ultra-lefts, which is the MK party, the EFF, that will ultimately mean the ANC allowing these two parties to continue eating into their base. But if they go with the Democratic Alliance, it would alienate the ANC from its mass base within the country, and those who are moderates within the ANC's National Executive Committee, NWC, may be pushing the ANC towards that posture of the DA, but that will ultimately lead to the biggest split ideologically within the ANC since the split of the PAC, because the split of the EFF, UDM, MK party, those are all factional battles within the ANC. They've had nothing to do with the ideological posture of the organization. But this coalition agreements does have the potential to fracture the ANC ideologically. Hence, you've seen the labor movement come to the fore to say, once you go into a coalition with the DA, you are moving away from the workers within the country, and we as COSATU will ultimately be forced to dump you.
Now, when we look at some of these voices, I mean, the ANC has prided itself for the longest time of being that broad church, but it seems now it's becoming problematic when you speak of the ultra-left, the more centrist, and ones that are even leaning towards very right policies. Which is the loudest voice now, it seems? Because if you've got the Gwede Mantashes with the history of the labor movement as well as COSATU as an alliance partner, are they really strong enough, or is their voice amplified within the NWC now for them to be heard at this moment?
It's very difficult to say which is the largest voice within the ANC's in National Working Committee, because you've got a former trade unionist in Senzo Mchunu within that National Working Committee of the African National Congress. You've got some who've also come through the ranks of this particular trade union movements, whether it's NUM, NOMSA, or all these other formations, SATU, NHAU, who sit in the ANC's highest decision-making body and National Working Committee. For instance, you take a Gwede Mantashe, he's a former General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. You take a Cyril Ramaphosa, the founding General Secretary of the NUM, March, who has become a capitalist over the years with his various business ventures with Shanduka and his farming enterprises that are there.
So he would empathize with the business community to a certain extent, which is what the DA also espouses here, because they would want generally to not have the business sector alienated. So what happens now?
Fundo, what we must not take away from these particular coalition negotiations is the familiarity of individuals. As much as we've got to factor in market friendliness political formations, but you also can't put markets ahead of your own base, because if you do not have your own base, those very same markets will come and fund regime change within your own country. Hence, you look at the funding model of political formations, the people who've donated to the opposition parties that have ultimately played a part in bringing the ANC down. Besides, not the Moonshot Pact can never claim that they brought the ANC under 50%. It is Jacob Zuma solely who brought the ANC under 50% with his MK party by taking 14% of those votes from the ANC, because if the MK party was not there, ultimately the ANC would hover around 52-53%, taking the votes of the 40 point something the ANC got and the 14% of the MK party. But those it pushes them above 50. It's at 54-55. So you've got to look at the nitty-gritty of the relationships people have. What people don't know is the close relationship Cyril Ramaphosa enjoys with the Economic Freedom Fighter. He's got a very close-knit relationship with Julius Silo Malema of the EFF, very close-knit relationship with Floyd Shivambu, the Deputy President of the EFF, who themselves, they fail to hide. President Cyril Ramaphosa has a close relationship with Julius Malema, with Floyd Shivambu. It is ultimately, even there in the records, in 2019, Cyril Ramaphosa offered Julius Malema, offered Floyd Shivambu cabinet posts. They declined, and Julius Malema then said, no, put these particular people as ministers and deputy ministers, your Castle Matales, your Pinky Kekanas, that whole Limpopo crew that led the ANC before the 2012 conference of the ANC. Julius Malema ultimately also saying they once visited Cyril Ramaphosa's house with Floyd Shivambu to discuss the issue of Pravin Gordhan, and they had agreed to pull back on attacking Pravin Gordhan. But after they left that particular meeting, he called the president back and said, no, they can't agree to that particular discussion that they had. And that just speaks of the closeness he has with the Economic Freedom Fighters, despite them differing politically. Then you've got Helen Zille.
In the public domain.
In the public domain. Then you've got Helen Zille, who has publicly said that the DA can work with an ANC led by Cyril Ramaphosa. Then that brings into the fore the balance of forces within the ANC. But if the DA claims Cyril Ramaphosa, it ultimately alienates him from the National Executive Committee that he ultimately leads. But also the EFF itself has done itself a disservice back in 2016 by objecting to work with the ANC, by giving them an exam to write, in the words of Fikile Mbalula. So the ANC is caught between a rock and a hard place where they've got to choose. Either they split themselves in half ideologically by choosing the DA, or they maintain their base, but they will ultimately alienate the capitalist class within South Africa and internationally if they go with the EFF. Because Jacob Zuma's party, the MK, and him, he will ultimately say to them, remove Cyril Ramaphosa, I will give you my votes. But that would be historical of the ANC to take the MK party's stance, because Jacob Zuma was protected by the very same ANC in 2016 when the EFF wanted him removed as president of the ANC. Thus, those particular negotiations fell off, which is the exam Fikile Mbalula speaks of. So ultimately, what you have is the ANC having to negotiate and tread very carefully, but, which may ultimately be the winner, a minority government. Don't rule out that particular aspect where the ANC doesn't choose any of these political formations, but strikes a deal with one party to say, don't field the candidate, abstain, we will run a minority government.
Samkele, interesting perspective there. It is a difficult time for the African National Congress and all political parties, in fact. Thank you very much for that. That is senior political reporter Samkele Maseko speaking to us.